Welcome, one and all, to the episode 41 of the NFL Draft Breakdown Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Cox. With me tonight, my co-host, Justin Higdon. Justin, power's back on in the burbs in Chicago. How everything okay?
Yeah, we had a power outage earlier. We weren't sure if we were going to be able to go tonight, but we are. We're on. We're doing the ACC tonight. And this is kind of going off of this giveaway that we did this week. So this week, for subscribers new and old, we're giving away the Draft Breakdown Podcast 2017 NFL Draft Preseason Prospect Preview. And this preview is over 350 players, and we've got every conference covered. We've got the conferences arranged alphabetically. We've got the players within each conference, teams and players within each conference arranged alphabetically. I've got it updated thanks to a listener, Luke, out there, who actually helped me arrange so that we've actually got the table of contents, so it's hyperlinked. You can actually click on the team in the table of contents now, and it'll take you right to that page to reference it. So what you can do is you can pull this guide up while you're watching games this fall, click on the team that you're watching. It's going to go right to that team, show you some players that I previewed. We've got recruiting information, height, weight, age, some relevant statistics, fun facts, off the field, injury history. So I think it's a really good thing. It's about 130 pages. It's completely free. All you have to do is take a screen cap that shows us that you're subscribing on iTunes or that you're following on SoundCloud. You just send it to us on Twitter, or you can email it to us. My email's in my bio on Twitter. I'm at AFC to NFC. And we'll send that to you free. We've gotten a very good response so far, and people seem to like what we're sending out. So we're going to keep building off that. That's our offer for this, and we're trying to, just build our following and build our listenership, because we've got a lot of great things in store this season.
Yeah, and it's going to be a fun time, and we appreciate you guys listening. Justin spent a lot of time doing all of this. This was all Justin, so you guys give him some love, and he did all of this labor of love for free. Like he said, like 127 pages. Like it's a legit, like it's something that you get. I've seen, and I can't say from where, but I've seen the Blesto that they send out to the NFL. And the only difference is Justin just didn't rank everybody. All Blesto does is they rank players like 1 to however many seniors there are, and put a little scouting number next to it with their rankings. This is better. This has more information, and this lets you know a little bit about these players. So, really props to Justin for taking the time out to do that and really helping us out. Let's get started.
I wanted to add real quick, this is only going to be available for a limited time. So right now we're taping this. This podcast is going to be posted on August 12th, most likely, is when most of you are going to be listening to us. This offer is going to be good through August 19th. So you got to jump on this within the next week. Many people have already jumped on this. I may extend it. Just depends what kind of mood I'm in. But for right now, the free offer extends through next Friday. And then because the following Friday, I think is when, or is it this following Saturday? But it's when the season kicks off with Cal and Hawaii. I think it's a Friday night game. And then we have the full season kickoff the following week.
Yep. So take advantage now. It'll be a great tool to have for the upcoming college football season, whether you're, an internet scout or not. It's wonderful to have. It's a great key. I have people that we've sent it to, and they absolutely love it. And so we'll have them on, and they can tell you how great it is. But take advantage of it. So tonight, the ACC, and we're going to go off the book. So I'm going to skip some players because some of these are fake names to me. But we're going to go straight from the book. So we're going to start in the ACC with Boston College, and the only interesting guy is their transfer senior Patrick Tolles. He was a senior at Kentucky, or he graduated
Right,
from
he's a
Kentucky.
graduate transfer.
So a graduate transfer from Kentucky. He is completely interesting to me. We talked about graduate transfers last week or 2 weeks ago, and how a lot of times it's just because they're not good. This could be a case of where a guy finally gets to a little bit of a better situation. Because I tell you what, that, him in Kentucky was not ideal. I mean, do you think so?
I was interested in Tolles going into last season. He was a fourth-year junior, and I had watched tape of him the year before in 2014. They were playing, I think, South Carolina, and Tolles was really spreading the ball out, and you could see that he had a very good arm. But Kentucky kept calling wildcat type plays. They would move Tolles out. They would split him out, and they had a running back or receiver that they were giving a lot of wildcat snaps to, and it was just like Tolles was in a rhythm. He was playing well. There was no reason to do this. And Kentucky, he was probably one of the better quarterbacks they've had in a long time. And yet they are going away from him, even though he's having a pretty good game against what's a pretty respected SEC program in South Carolina. And they just keep splitting this guy out wide. And it was really, really aggravating. And then, of course, last year we look at what he did, and it just wasn't – he fell off. We thought that he was going to have like a jumping off point last year, and instead he only completes 56% of passes. He actually
9 to 14 touchdown to interception ratio.
Yeah, exactly. And he's a decently athletic guy. Like, he can move around. He's very big. He can move around a little bit, but he added 5 rushing touchdowns last year. I think Boston College is a good move for him. It was definitely a great move for him to get out of Kentucky, and he's going to be young enough that I don't think, don't get us wrong, this isn't going to be a first round prospect. He's not going to pull Matt Ryan and go first round out of Boston College, but I'm always interested in these graduate transfers, and Tolles is one that really piques my interest because I think if a team sticks with him, he's got – obviously we know NFL people like his size, and they're going to like his arm, and they're going to find him as an intriguing late-round guy. If they take a guy like Nate Sudfeld late in the draft, and then, holy hell, like Jake Rudock went in the 6th round. Tolles is a much bigger, toolsier player than a guy like Rudock. He compares physically to a Sudfeld, but he doesn't have just kind of – he's not throwing those worm burners like Sudfeld was throwing late last year. So I think Tolles has a chance to really improve his stock in a new scene this year.
The other 2 players, John Johnson, I know nothing about, but anytime you get a corner that's listed at 6 feet tall and over 200 pounds, he's gonna draw some interest from the NFL because they are trending towards that, larger cornerbacks.
Yeah, he's a cornerback safety kind of hybrid prospect, and I don't really know much about him either, but he had 3 interceptions last year. He plays special teams, so that's a player that teams are going to have their eyes on just because he's a bigger guy and he can play all around the defense backfield.
And finally, you have Harold Landry, an edge player, 6'3", 250. He's only got 4.5 career sacks, so he's not pass rusher at this point, but edge players always tend to get overinflated based on their measurables, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we're going on potential here. This is a guy, I think it was PFF that kind of brought him to my attention. And being a true junior from Boston College and a guy who has 4.5 sacks in his career in 23 games, and they all came last year. We can't really say that he's going to make the leap to the pros, but we got to keep our eye on a guy like this, 6'3", 250, and he's going to have opportunities to get to the quarterback. So 14.5 tackles for loss last year. That is eye-opening, and we need to keep an eye on him.
Moving on to Clemson, you have, just a plethora of players. Start with Ben Boulware, their linebacker, kind of their leader on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah,
he's a smaller guy at 6 feet 240, and John Ledyard got called out by him when he tweeted out, "I don't know if he's athletic enough," or something to that nature, to make it in the NFL. And Clemson and Boulware kind of went right after Ledyard. So if you're going to criticize him, be wary. They do read the press clippings, and they'll come after you. I like Boulware, but I'm an admitted apologist to the throwback inside linebacker.
I kind of am too, but I kind of side with John Ledyard in this situation because, like, he wasn't dogging him. He was just kind of pointing out that he's not a first round or day 1, day 2 type of linebacker. He's a productive linebacker, but Boulware he's kind of a plugger, and I don't even think, like, I really liked Scooby Wright. You guys who have listened to this show a long time know that I was a Scooby Wright supporter. He ends up going in the 7th round of the draft, and I think Boulware, Scooby dropped a lot because of the injuries. He battled through a lot of injuries, and Boulware himself had played through a shoulder injury late last year. But what was funny to me is Boulware, as you mentioned, kind of a name searcher apparently, and kind of replied to John with some tweets of him making an interception, but his vertical, it looked like it was about 25 inches maybe. So I'm not dogging Boulware. I like him. He's a very dogged player, and I don't think you need to be super athletic to play the type of middle linebacker role and maybe special teams role that he's going to play. I think a lot of that can be a lunch pail type of thing, not to sound cliche, but I think he's definitely going to be a leader on that defense this year. I don't envision him being a high pick. I think he's a day 3 type of guy. But I've liked guys like that. Besides Scooby Wright, I've mentioned in the past Zach Vigil, who ended up going to the Miami Dolphins, I think in the 7th round or as an undrafted free agent a couple of years ago, and sticking around. So to me, Boulware is that type.
From there you have Wayne Gallman, running back. What do you think of him?
I think people are a little bit too high on him. He really will have like an eye-popping run here and there, but I don't think he's super shifty, and he's not really. He's built kind of like what Melvin Gordon was built like, kind of a little bit on the tall side and a little bit on the thin side, and that type of player. I like big backs. You guys know that I like Derrick Henry, and there's other guys that talked about Samaje Perine last week who I like. But Gallman is a little bit thinner than that. He's kind of an upright guy, and he just hasn't had for being in an offense that has Deshaun Watson opening things up with his arm and his legs, and for Wayne Gallman, who was really, really productive. 1,527 rushing yards last year. But I look at the yards per carry, 5.4, and that's kind of in the middle. That's kind of middle of the road production. But he can catch the ball out of the backfield, and he is a guy who's scored a lot of touchdowns. He's a redshirt junior, so I do expect him to declare. But I think I look at Wayne Gallman more as a mid-round pick. I do not think he's going to be like – I think some people are really high on him. I've seen some people talk about him as being just as good as some of the other top backs that we think of in the class. Like, I don't think Gallman's in that class. He's like middle round. And if we look at a player like Kenneth Dixon, where he went in the 4th round, I actually liked Kenneth Dixon's all-around game better than Wayne Gallman. So it's going to be in the eye of the beholder when it comes to running back. But Gallman, 4th round, 5th round, I think is where he's ticketed for.
Jordan Leggett is a tight end, big guy for this offense, 6'5", 255. It's hard to get a beat on what he is when, they don't necessarily use him as much as you would like.
Yeah, but Jordan Leggett, I was kind of surprised he went back to school. Honestly, it was a thin tight end class last year, and Leggett had 40 catches for over 500 yards and 8 TDs. So he is 6'5", almost 260. I was pretty surprised he went back. I thought he had momentum, especially late in the year, and he was playing well in the playoff game. So I think he has a potential to go in day 2, 2nd or 3rd round. People are going to love his size, and he's got some athletic ability. And he was first team all conference last year. So, I really like him.
Yeah, he is that's the guy that draws interest because he is so big. And it's just something that you're not used to seeing from, Clemson athletes. They're usually more move tight ends in size. So,
yeah, I think what's going to happen too is people are going to start picking apart his blocking and things like that. I don't think he's the best blocker in the world, but look at that target. If you look at him as a receiving tight end and you look at how big he is and how athletic he is, then that's a player that you can work with, you can coach up. And I'm going to look more at his production as a receiver than as his blocking, because what he can put together as a receiver is going to be more valuable. Now, that being said, I think we're seeing a trend in the NFL where teams are starting to look for late round tight ends and even kind of free agent tight ends that are athletic, like how the Browns picked up Gary Barnidge a couple of years ago, and then he becomes a Pro Bowler at 30 years old. So I don't know. Maybe the NFL is starting to devalue tight ends as draft picks. We saw like Max Williams, a lot of draft Twitter hyped him as a potential first rounder, and he ends up going in the 3rd round. So I think I think Jordan Leggett's he's definitely a bigger guy, and I think he's every bit as athletic as Max Williams, which is going to be better because he's bigger. I'm not sure he's going to make. I think he's made some acrobatic catches similar to what we saw to Max Williams. Max Williams had this one-handed highlight sideline catch that really blew everyone's mind. But Leggett's a good player.
From there, you have Artavis Scott. Just burst onto the scene last year after, a very good but overshadowed year by Mike Williams, his teammate, who got injured. Scott, or not Scott, but the injury to Williams is probably the best thing for Scott as a player, because he showed that he can put up the same numbers or similar numbers without Williams kind of pulling the defensive way. I think he's going to be a day 2 wide receiver, but that's not necessarily a bad thing in this NFL.
I think it's interesting the way they use Scott in that short passing game, kind of the way Ole Miss was using Laquan Treadwell early on in his career, where it's holding back his yards per catch. He is getting so many short screens and just kind of tunnel screens, bubble screens, and things like that. But Scott is a guy who they will use on kick and punt returns. He's a much smaller guy than Treadwell. But as an older guy, a guy who will turn 22 this year as a junior, I think he will declare. And he had 93 catches last year. But like I said, they were holding him back and making him a space player, kind of like what we saw. We're not going to see another guy like Tavon Austin go 8th overall. So Artavis Scott, I think day 2 might be a good range. So maybe third round, because the way they were kind of using him was similar to what Pitt was doing maybe with Tyler Boyd last year.
From there, we go to Carlos. Oh, sorry. Cordea Tankersley. Again, bigger cornerback. It's listed at 6'1". How many guys on this defense do you take seriously?
I take Tankersley seriously. I think that some people are making an argument that he was the better of the corners between Tankersley and Mackenzie Alexander. And, I wasn't super high on Alexander because he's so tiny, and just the way they played, like sometimes Alexander was getting turned around a lot, and he wasn't getting targeted though on some of those plays. Tankersley was getting targeted, and then he had 5 interceptions. So I like that kind of production. I know that we talked about this on Twitter, and I don't know if we've talked about this on the show, but one of the things that Bill Belichick talks about when scouting defensive backs, he likes to combine interceptions and pass breakups for the player over the final, I think it was their final 2 college years. And then he likes to rank them and kind of build off that for production. So when you look at Tankersley, he had 5 interceptions and 9 pass breakups last year. If he continues to get targeted and be productive, and at 6'1" and almost 200 pounds, then that's a valuable player, at least to some people who follow that kind of school of thought that Belichick put out there.
It is. Anytime you pick up pointers from a guy like Belichick and you see what they, care about matters. Carlos Watkins on the defensive line. And this is what you get. I just want to kind of make a nugget of here and kind of continue to praise Justin. He has a red flag. His red flag is that he was seriously injured in a car accident of September of 2013, missed all but 3 games that year. So it's just one of those things that's good to know. Like, there was an injury history that you just have to be aware of when you're grading these guys. I know we can't grade medicals except we have this information. So, you can always have the information and make a decision with it as you will.
And with Watkins, it's not just that he was injured in the car accident, but I believe he suffered some knee ligament damage. So we've talked about this. It's a 6'3", 300-pound defensive lineman who is kind of a pressure player in their defense, kind of in a similar vein of what Grady Jarrett was when he was there. Tackles for loss, sacks. And when we talk about smaller defensive linemen that rely on some explosiveness or good first step, then those knee injuries can come back to haunt you. And that's what I really harped on that one when Dominic Easley was coming out. And, of course, he ends up going to the first round despite that, and he ends up, whether you believe it's for injuries or off-the-field issues, he ends up getting cut within a couple of years, being a first-round pick. Now he's with the Rams trying to hold on, but that's why I note something like that, because it doesn't mean Watkins had a good year last year, and he played the full year, but you have to keep an eye on something like that because the NFL is going to look at the injury history. They're not just going to look at the previous year. If something like that injury that he suffered in that car accident is causing some residual arthritis, something that you can look at later on. If he drops in the draft, you can look back to this and say, maybe that's why he dropped.
Exactly. From there, you have Deshaun Watson. I've talked about him before. I'm a big fan. I think he is I think he's Russell Wilson, and that's huge praise. I think he can be the next Russell Wilson. So that's just me.
I love Watson. I think that we're going to start to see nitpicking of him but look at what he's done as a freshman and a sophomore. And he did have an ACL injury at the end of 2014, and he still comes back and he takes his team to the national championship game. I mean, this guy He rushed for over 1,000 yards, and he threw for over 4,000 yards coming off an ACL injury. He ends up third in the Heisman voting. He's a Mr. All-Everything ACC. I love Watson. I think he's on track to be the number one pick, and he doesn't have the ideal size. We're going to see him measure at about 6'2", but he did make note that he was a thin guy, and the word is that he put on bulk over the offseason. So he's cognizant of the fact that the NFL doesn't want a skinny, scrawny quarterback with a potential knee issue. He's trying to get ahead of the game and get himself conditioned. And what a player. I mean, when Seth and I watched the national championship game together, we weren't in the same room, but we did a show at halftime. And Deshaun Watson was the best player on the field for both teams. He was really, in my opinion, he was really carrying Clemson and keeping them in the game. And that's against a really talented Alabama team that ends up winning the national championship. I mean, this guy's the real deal.
Absolutely. And then last but definitely not least, a player that was probably a first-round pick in 2015 until a freak injury where he hit the goalpost, right?
Yeah, he
slid into the goalpost. Mike Williams, 6'4", 210. I mean, he was the next, big wide receiver. And it's a game, they all understand the realities of the NFL and how dangerous it is, or football in general. But I mean, just on such a weird way to injure yourself, it's so unfortunate. And you hurt for the guy, and you hope that he comes back this year and is the player that he was before.
Yeah, when I note a neck injury on a receiver, I'm probably not going to. If he comes in and has a good year this year and stays healthy, I'm probably not going to really dock him for this neck injury. So when people see this preview and they see a red flag, and I note this in the key, the red flag doesn't mean I'm not going to draft this guy. It's just something that we want to be aware of going forward. So we want to know that he suffered a neck injury and that teams are going to be checking that out. That's something when they get to the medical portion of the combine and things like that, they're going to look at him. But Mike Williams, career-wise, 79 receptions, averaging over 17 yards a catch. He's going to be a big play receiver, and they have big plans for him. He could have come out last year and kind of played his cards to see if teams would have overlooked a neck injury, but he comes back to try and rebuild some of that stock, and I think that speaks to his confidence. I might be reading into that, but I like this move, and I think that he's got a chance to maybe get into that first-round conversation because he's going to have one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterbacks in college football throwing to him.
Exactly, and you just hope he continues to take the next step in health more than anything else. Getting to Duke, Casey Blasser is an offensive lineman.
He's a right tackle. I think the thing we're looking at when we're talking about a Duke offensive lineman is this is a player who is a 2-year starter. So he's going into his third year as a starter at right tackle, and it's worth noting. I don't know much about Casey. I just think that it's worth looking at players who are 3- and 4-year starters on the offensive line because even if they're not drafted, they're players that teams are going to look at in undrafted free agency because they have so much experience.
Exactly. And then their quarterback, Thomas Sirk. Dude is a walking wounded.
Yeah.
I don't think he can get drafted. He's torn both Achilles tendons.
Right. And Thomas Sirk, he tore his Achilles tendon this past February. So, and he had torn his right Achilles. Yeah, he had torn his right Achilles in 2013, and then he tears his left Achilles in practice in this past February. So we're not even sure if he's going to be ready to go at the start of this season. But the thing is, he was having a really good year in 2015, or he had a really good year in 2015 where he He threw for over 2,500 yards and he rushed for over 800 yards. He's a mobile guy and he's 6'4", 240. So worth looking at, because if he comes back from that Achilles injury, then he's got the size and he's an athletic guy. So he's going to get looks.
Exactly. From there, we go to Florida State, the other kind of powerhouse right now in the ACC. Miami will be back soon. Nate Andrews is a safety, 6 feet, 214. We talked about this a little bit last week. These bigger safeties, these guys that can play up in the box. What's your thought process?
With Nate Andrews, one of the things that's going to appeal is when we talk about injuries, we're usually talking about guys who miss games. But in Nate Andrews' case, I don't have this red flag because he played through a dislocated thumb and a bone bruise in his right knee. So he doesn't have structural damage to that knee. It was a bone bruise. And the thumb, I think he was wearing a club early in the season to play through that. And as a kind of box safety, you can get away with that. And he toughed his way through it. He didn't play full time, but he was a contributor, and he's had a really good career. He's played 41 games for the Seminoles. So I think Nate Andrews is a potential late round pickup from Florida State, a guy who's a heavy hitter, and I think he's a guy who teams look at as a potential special teamer and backup safety.
From there, one of the better running backs. Oh, sorry, skip somebody. My bad. Kareem R is an offensive lineman. He's a JUCO guy. Massive, 6'6", 334 pounds. He had a knee injury last season that kind of plagued him. Only 8 starts in college football, all at left guard. 6'6" for a left guard is kind of big.
Yeah, and he's over 330. So he's just one of these massive guards that Florida State's been producing over the years. They've kind of been going late in the draft or undrafted, but it's somebody to keep an eye on. He was relatively well pursued out of JUCO, and he came in and started and made those starts his first year out of, or I guess it was his second year out of JUCO. So we'll just follow him. I mean, he's not. I don't think he's a draftable prospect at this point, but he's one of these types of players. When you have a guy who has starts at Florida State and is a big guy, he's probably going to get a Shrine Game invite if he starts this year.
Then we go to the one and only Dalvin Cook. 5'11", 206.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of red flags on Dalvin Cook. The player is a unique talent, but he's had some off-the-field incidents as well as some injury concerns. That being said, he's a special player. Now, the question I have, and I made this comparison, I think I'm going to get killed for it, which I'm okay with. I don't really care. But he kind of reminds me of Amir Abdullah, right, from Nebraska. Bigger or, shorter, but kind of a compact build, and can win between the tackles. Abdullah went in the second round. The Arizona Cardinals loved Amir Abdullah, loved him. He was going to be their second round pick before the Lions jumped up in front of him and took him. What do you think? That's a fair comparison? Am I not giving Dalvin Cook enough credit? What are your thoughts?
Cook's a little bit taller, at least, than Abdullah, and he doesn't have the fumble history that Abdullah had. But the thing is, like, Cook was accused of hitting a woman. He was ultimately found not guilty, but I don't think that clears him in the eyes of the NFL. I think that's something that they're still going to look into. They might very well. There are going to be teams that determine that's not an issue at all, and they're going to move on from that. But there are other teams that are going to shy away from that because there is PR involved in this. It's not just, is this guy talented? Can we live with him? If there wasn't PR involved, we would see some of these guys who had off-the-field issues get signed. And the NFL is being more and more careful about that. So I think that is something that's going to ding him, or at least something that teams are going to really dig into. I've read a lot about that case. I'm not really sure what happened. I would want to talk to the guy, but as things stand, I think being found not guilty is the most important thing at this point. He's got no ramifications from this, but I think it is worth noting. But I think the big flag on him is that he's had left shoulder surgery prior to college, and then he had right shoulder surgery, and then he had another right shoulder surgery. So this is a player who's a running back, and if we're talking about between the tackles, he's had 3 shoulder surgeries in the past couple of years, and then he missed a game last year with a sprained ankle, which isn't a huge deal. He also had a hamstring pull that probably contributed to missing some time, but what you have is an accumulation of injuries, and then you have a back who's only 206 pounds, and teams are going to start looking at him like they did with Duke Johnson a couple years ago, who I loved, and I still have high hopes for. But that is going to ding him. Duke Johnson goes in the 3rd round. Maybe Dalvin Cook goes a little higher than that, but I don't think you're going to see Dalvin Cook go in the 1st round. And I'm not saying that he's not a good player. I think Dalvin Cook is a dynamic player. I like him a lot, but I don't think he's going to be a 1st-round draft pick.
And I agree with that. So, I think Dalvin Cook's going to be a 2nd-round pick, and I think he's going to be and he has a chance to be a very good player in the NFL.
Absolutely.
The guy that I think is going to be in contention to be the top non-quarterback taken, and this is how I think we're going to start doing draft stuff. You're going to talk about the quarterbacks, and you're going to talk about everybody else. That's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, are you talking about Roderick Johnson?
I just mean in general. Like, I think, that's the thing. Like, this year, Justin and I weren't fans of Jared Goff. I like Carson Wentz, but I liked him at the back end of round 1, beginning of round 2. And we're much higher on, like a Joey Bosa.
Absolutely.
Yet, we knew that in the shape of everything that they were going to draft a quarterback first. And so I think that's just the way the NFL works at this time. Anyways, I think Roderick Johnson is going to be in contention to be the first non-quarterback selected in the 2017 NFL draft. He is that prototype left tackle, 6'7". They list him at 307. He looks like he can put on about 10, 15 pounds if he needed to. 18 starts at left tackle. He's the dude. I just like watching this kid play.
Yeah, I think he's a better tackle than what we saw to Cameron Irving early in his starting stint for Florida State. And we remember that Cameron Irving moved to offensive tackle from the defensive side of the ball. So Roderick Johnson is, right off the bat, he becomes a starter as a freshman, I think about midway through his freshman year or kind of later in his freshman year, and then starts throughout last year. And then the coaches and the media, they determined that he was the conference's best blocker last year. So he has that pedigree, he has that build. He's young. He'll only be 21 this November. So this is a guy that teams are going to love. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think in this case, last year when we weren't high on Goff and Wentz as first-round players, sure, we still understood that they were going to be drafted high. We didn't support that. But in this case, we're going to – at this point, I would support Deshaun Watson as being a high first-round draft pick. But I could see Roderick Johnson. If something happens to Deshaun Watson or if he doesn't declare, which would surprise me, then Roderick Johnson's going to move – I think probably going to move into that conversation. But, I'm not here to – the reason I don't rank players like Blesto or some of these scouting services because I did all this background research, but I haven't watched enough games of these guys where I've broken down tape to say that this guy is a sure first rounder or not. But I think in Roderick Johnson's case, I've seen enough Florida State to say that he's probably going to be a first round pick.
Another guy that's going to get some first round whispers, defensive end DeMarcus Walker. He's a big dude at 6'3", 273, kind of that older school, defensive end in the NFL. Led the team in sacks last year with 10 and a half. The hard part is he's only got 12 and a half sacks in his career. He's a senior this year. So you want to see the second year of production. You want to see another year of 10-plus sacks before you say, okay, this is a guy that I want to take a chance on in round, 1, 2.
Right. Walker is the first – this shocked me. He was the first Florida State player to get double-digit sacks since 2012. But he got 10 and a half last year. But I think he's kind of a tweener. Seth, I think I don't think he's as athletic he doesn't strike me as athletic as a guy as how Shaq Lawson tested last year. So is he kind of like oh gosh, who's the defensive end that got picked from there a couple of years ago whose father was an NFL player? I'm drawing a complete blank because I liked him. But Mario Williams. Yeah.
Oh, Mario Williams.
Or is that right?
Yeah, Mario Williams. Not Mario Williams. Mario Edwards.
Mario Edwards. Jeez. Unfollow me on Twitter right now. Mario Edwards Jr., who I liked. I liked him a lot, but he was kind of a tweener, and he kind of fluctuated between 270 and 300. So Walker kind of strikes me as that kind of build. But I really the thing about Mario Edwards is I saw him break down and cover a running back running a wheel route and sticking with him. And that stuck with me big time because I thought if this guy shaves off the weight that he gained before he was drafted, that he can be a baller. And then he was playing really well before he had that neck injury last year. DeMarcus Walker, I don't think he's as good as Mario Edwards Jr., but to me, he's that same kind of tweener type player. So our team's going to want him to add a little bit of weight. But I was impressed with him. I mean, I thought I was impressed with him enough that I thought he might have declared last year and been like a day 2 pick. But I think it was such a deep pool. He goes back. He's a true senior. And I think he's still going to be a day 2 pick. I don't really think he's going to improve his stock, but I think he's a good player, rotational type of defensive end who's going to, he's going to start somewhere, or he's got potential to start somewhere, or at least get a ton of snaps.
And we'll start flying through these. Marquez White, cornerback, 6 foot, 184.
Most interesting thing about him is that he played on FSU's basketball team. So this is a player.
And you listen to people like Eric Stoner, and they want, cornerbacks that are good basketball players because they think the footwork mimics a lot of those things. So that's a good thing to hear, and it also means he's a great athlete.
Yeah, I like multi-sport athletes, but at this point, I think he's probably trended toward a late-round flyer type, undrafted free agent type.
Georgia Tech has one prospect, quarterback Justin Thomas. Now, he will be moved to running back, I'm assuming.
Running back or wide receiver. He's 5'11", 185, and he has a career 46.9 completion percentage. And, of course, they play that triple option. Including
a stellar 41.7% last year. Very good runner, though. Excellent runner. And he was a champion sprinter in high school. So it's not like he's going to be, pressed for athleticism.
Justin Thomas is definitely going to get a look. It's just where is he going to get a look, and how big of a look is he going to get? Is he going to be a Shrine Game guy, or is he going to have a big enough year to work his way into Senior Bowl consideration where he's going to go to the Senior Bowl as a receiver? I think the potential's there.
D'Angelo Brown, moving on to Louisville. D'Angelo Brown is a defensive lineman, another defensive lineman with a leg injury. 6'1", 310, missed entire 2013 season with an Achilles injury. Last year he did pretty well. 6.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Nice player. Anytime you're talking leg injuries with a big dude like that, that's concerning.
I included Brown because he's on Bruce Feldman's top 20 freak list because he can bench press 315 pounds 21 times. So that's good enough for me to flag this guy and want to keep an eye on him, but I don't know much about him.
Exactly. From there, we go to maybe one of the more intriguing prospects in this draft, a surefire first-round pick after his freshman season. Yes, freshman season, Devontae Fields, an edge rusher, 6'4", about 245, Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year as a freshman in 2012.
But it seems like an eternity ago.
It does. But that was 2012.
Yeah.
From there, he was suspended for his sophomore season at the beginning and then was lost for the year with a foot injury. Then from there, he was dismissed from TCU in 2014 after he allegedly punched his girlfriend and threatened her with a gun. They were dismissed after he completed anger management requirements of his plea deal. He's played in 29 games, and he has absurd numbers.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going off...
Yeah, and he hasn't gotten in trouble since he's been back at Louisville.
If he's going off numbers, this guy, I mean, if you're going off numbers and just athleticism, he had 11 sacks last season, 22 and a half tackles for loss. We know this guy can play. He could play at TCU. He can play at Louisville. But unlike Dalvin Cook, who I said was found not guilty, we're talking about Fields having the charges dismissed, assault charges that he punched his girlfriend and threatened her, as you said, with a weapon. Those charges were dismissed because he completed anger management requirements. And he's had multiple off-the-field issues. There was, as you mentioned, there was already a suspension before that. So I don't think we can trust players like this. There are going to be guys that take flyers. There are going to be teams that take flyers on this. Frank Clark comes to mind, where he was dismissed from Michigan and ultimately goes in the second round to Seattle. So Devontae Fields, I don't think he's going to make it out of day two. He's probably going to be a second-round pick. But you are kind of playing with fire, and I'm not sure of his age. I do know he has a September birthday, and just being that he is a 2012 recruit, my best estimate is that he will be 24 years old at the start of his rookie year. He might be 23 if he started school early, but either way, you have a ton of red flags on this guy.
And he's the guy that I think a team like the Arizona Cardinals, the New England Patriots, Seattle Seahawks will take it's not even a flyer because he's a good player, but they will take a risk on that. It just, it's kind of what these guys do now. Now the Cardinals
I don't think he's going to be a first-round pick, though.
No, but the Cardinals may not because they just picked up Robert Kimdiche, and
who had way less of a red flag history.
Right. But they also, they may not want. They may wait another year to make sure Kimdiche is, a good ball player. So or behaves type thing.
And you mentioned the Patriots, and they just dumped Chandler Jones to your team.
He's a great player. I don't want to hear anything negative about him.
That's fine.
So, No, but you're right. Heading from there, another 5-star recruit. Devontae Fields was a 4-star recruit, but another great high school player that was supposed to be a special player. And you want to talk about a big safety.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Harvey Clemens, 6'5", 230, a redshirt senior, same class as Devontae Fields, 2012.
Right.
Suspended 4 games from Georgia, and then ultimately was dismissed after multiple reported failed drug tests in February of 2014. Sat out 14 and is back this year, or was back 2015 and had a nice season, and now is, looking to get back to being considered as a top player. Um, what are your thoughts?
To me, Josh Harvey Clemens is at 6'5". He's listed at 6'5", 230. So I think when you see a guy that tall playing some defensive backfield, you kind of got to wait on those measurements and see if they really
Well,
check out. But
especially at Louisville, where Calvin Pryor was
right,
listed at 6'2" and then measured at 5'11". That just means that Harvey Clemens is going to be 6'2", which is fine. That's a good size for a safety.
even if he's like 6'2" and 220, I think that teams are going to look at him as that hybrid player, that type of what the Rams did with Mark Barron, what your Cardinals did with Deion Buchanan. So Harvey Clemens, to me, he's more linebacker than defensive back. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I love Deion Buchanan, but that it's just it might limit the teams that are interested in him, and then you go into the drug history. But the thing is, he transferred, and as far as I know, he's been trouble free since then. So a player who's had drug suspensions are more likely to give the benefit of the doubt than a player who's had assault charges.
Exactly. From there, we go to, I just lost my place. Sorry, Keith Kelsey, linebacker. First team All ACC last year. Is he a guy that can play in the NFL?
He's a little middle linebacker, so I think he's probably going to be a late round pick if he can get that stock up. But he's very productive, very, very good player. I think he's a draftable player.
James Quick, a wide receiver, another big-time recruit that's had some off-the-field issues.
Yeah, marijuana possession in 2014, violation of team rules where he was suspended for a game as a sophomore, and then he missed 2 games last year with sprained ankle. But big play receiver, 16 yards per catch last year. He's doesn't have exceptional size or anything like that. I think James Quick is a kind of late round player if you can get past the off the field stuff.
Brandon Radcliffe is an interesting running back because he's only 5'9", but he's 215 pounds.
Yeah, he's a little bowling ball. He's an undrafted free agent type to me because he's not only is he not an exceptional runner, he's a decent runner. He's productive, but he's going to be a 24-year-old rookie pre-draft. So he's just kind of, to me, he's kind of a dime a dozen running back. He's a guy you get in camp and you hope that he wins a spot for you. But I don't think he's a draftable player.
And Jamari Staples is a big wide receiver, 6'4", 195, transferred in from UAB. Is he a guy that can make a team?
Yeah, I think it was his coach, his receiver coach or position coach, who said he was one of the most under-recruited players in his memory. He was a 2-star recruit, and he only transfers to Louisville because UAB shut down at the time. But he has had troubles with injuries. But another guy, I think this was another guy from Bruce Feldman's freak list because he reportedly runs a 4.34 and has a 41-inch vertical at 6'4", almost 200 pounds. So you're talking about a burner. Averaging, he's a big play receiver, averaging over 17 yards a catch last year. Hasn't been super productive, but has been fairly productive. And I think he's got a potential. He's the type of player that can be a mover.
Exactly. Going to Miami, they have a couple interesting ones. First is Stacy Coley, a wide receiver, who looked like he was going to be just sensational at times, but then he hasn't taken the next step as a wide receiver yet.
I like Stacy Coley though because I don't think that Miami had that great of an offense last year, and I think he is kind of, I'm not comparing them as players, but as Ricardo Lewis from Auburn, who went in the 4th round to Cleveland, was productive despite poor quarterback play. I think that Coley was productive at Miami despite a high volume. They didn't have a high volume passing offense. It's not a knock on the quarterback, but they didn't have a high volume passing offense. And he battled through hamstring issues and had career highs last year. He's also a guy who can return kicks and punts, and he's a burner. So I think Coley is an underrated player at this point who maybe the production doesn't match the actual player that he is. And I think he has a chance to go higher than what maybe people are thinking about him right now. He might look like a day 3 pick on paper, but I think he's a guy that can move up, kind of like Devin Smith did with Ohio State a couple of years ago.
I think he's absolutely a day 2 pick. I thought he was, because he's 6'1", 193. I thought he was going to make a move, and he never has put it all together yet, which is interesting because his quarterback is Brad Kaya, who's also draft eligible. I'll get back to Rashawn in a second, but who's also draft eligible and is considered by many to be the 1B to the 1A of Deshaun Watson in this class.
Yeah, I'm not buying that. I don't see that in Brad Kaya. I don't see a player who should declare early in him going into the year. Now that can change, but one of the things that we talked about with Goff, and he ends up going 1 overall. So this kind of seems stupid, but I said that I thought Goff should have come back because I didn't think he was physically prepared for the NFL. And now we see, for those of you guys who are listening tonight who watched Hard Knocks, and Jared Goff didn't even know where the sun rose and set. He didn't know that the sun rose and set. He didn't know that where the sun rose and set. And Chris Weinke, his coach, was giving him a ton of crap for that. So I'm not saying Jared Goff is dumb, but he just kind of seemed a little bit immature. And by all accounts, he's not going to be the starter. And when you talk about a number 1 overall pick, then you kind of want a guy who comes in and takes command right away. And Brad Kaya, I think he's a decent quarterback, but I don't get the first round hype with this guy. I mean, does he make some Sunday throws? Sure, but he's a tall, slim guy. He's had a little bit of trouble with ball security, and he hasn't been super productive. So I think if we're going to talk about Brad Kaya as a first-round pick, then he needs to take a jump, and then he needs to maybe before they draft him in the first round, ask him if he knows that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, right?
Right. There we have Rashawn Johnson going backwards a little bit. Safety. Jenkins. Jenkins. And another one of these big guys, 6'2", 210. There's a whole new breed coming out.
Yeah, Jenkins is, I don't know a ton about him, but from what I have seen, he looks like a big hitter, and he's a big dude. But he missed 2014 with a back injury, and I think that is something that we've got to note. And, this is a player I'm looking at, 50-year senior. The thing is, I don't want to dog 50-year seniors because guys redshirt for a variety of reasons, but I don't think you see a ton of 5th-year seniors out of the defensive backfield become high draft picks. I think a lot of times if they're going to be high draft picks, they're either 3 or 4-year players.
And then finally, Joe Yearby, another one of these smaller guys, 5'9", 207. Hasn't lived up to the recruiting hype, but that's basically a common theme on these guys that came in under Al Golden, right?
I put Yearby on here just because he is eligible and because running backs do tend to declare early, but I do not think he is a guy who should declare early. I think he has a lot to prove.
I agree with that. Going to North Carolina, John Heck is an offensive lineman. He's had some ankle injuries in his career, but he's made 37 starts at right tackle, 6'7", right. 300 pounds. Another just one of those solid North Carolina offensive linemen that's going to come and be a backup player for 7 to 10 years in the NFL, you think?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know that he'll be drafted, but he's got tons of starting experience, and he's a big dude. So I think teams are going to work him out, and somebody's going to like him, and they might take him later or bring him in as an undrafted rookie, and he'll get a good look.
From there, you have Mac Hollins, another big wide receiver, 6'4", 210. He was a walk-on, but he's supposed to be a great special teamer. That's going to get him drafted, probably, don't you think? Like 6th, 7th round.
Yeah. If you look at Kasim Osgood, who was drafted years ago, I think by San Diego, and who had a Pro Bowl special teams career. This is the same body type, and he's one of the few players that I profiled who I looked at not only his receiving, but also his play on special teams, where he made tackles, covering kicks. So he's known as a very good special teams player, but he's also a guy who's already going to be 23 years old this year. So I don't think Mac Hollins, I think some people, he had a very, very productive year receiving last year. So he might work his way into those late rounds, but I don't think he's going to be high on anyone's board. But I do think he's a player who will make an NFL roster.
A guy that's getting a lot of traction, and a guy I really like, Elijah Hood, a running back, another big back, 6 feet, 220 pounds. I like this note. He is a former Eagle Scout.
Yeah.
So I like that note. But I think I like Hood. I like Hood more than you do, I'm pretty sure. I see him as a day 2 guy.
It's possible because he's such a young guy. He's only 20 years old, and he's 6 foot 220. He's built like Ezekiel Elliott. And the reason I put that down, that he's an Eagle Scout and academic All ACC, is because we've talked about how much the interview process weighs. We know that North Carolina is a tough academic school. This guy's going to blow people away in interviews. And he's probably going to graduate school early, and he's been super, super productive. I thought he was really good last year. And I really, I like this guy. I do think he could be a day 2 pick. And I think he's kind of overlooked when we hear all the conversations usually revolve around Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, and even maybe a Jalen Hurd, where we're tripping over ourselves with hot takes about those guys. And Elijah Hood kind of falls to the wayside, but I think he's a legit player. And he was a huge, big-time 5-star recruit for North Carolina. So he comes in 2014. He plays right away as a freshman, and then he blows it away last year, over 1,400 yards in a pretty productive offense. They had 3 productive receivers, a big time production at quarterback, even though Williams wasn't drafted, and then Hood's there putting up numbers. So their offense wasn't necessarily the problem.
Another offensive player, Jonathan Howard, nicknamed Bug. You want to talk about big, 6'5", 210.
Yeah.
Outside of that, do you think he moves well enough to be a guy that moves up, these rankings?
I think he can work his way into the late rounds. At this point, I think, I don't think he's a draftable player, but I think he's a guy who's going to get a look as a free agent. He's so big and tall. Teams are going to look at him as a red zone threat. I don't know that he's going to be fast enough to work his way to really be able to move up in the rankings, and he's kind of the third wheel as far as receivers in this offense, even with their quarterback on.
Des Lawrence is a cornerback at 6'1", 185. Second team All ACC last season, but he missed the first 5 games of his freshman season with an injury. 20 combined interceptions and pass breakups, only 3 interceptions though in his career. Is he a guy that can turn some heads this year?
Yeah, I think there's potential there, but I haven't really seen much out of him. 14 pass breakups caught my eye last year, but when I watched North Carolina last year, he didn't catch my eye. None of their defense did, to be fair.
Yeah. Caleb Peterson's another offensive lineman, 36 starts at left guard. but he's going to be 23 when the draft comes around.
Right.
Their offensive linemen aren't good. Let me tell you about that. No, I was kidding.
Well, the thing is, like, their best offensive lineman, I thought, was Landon Turner, and he tested horribly and went undrafted. So when I look at Peterson and I look at the other guy we talked about, Heck, it's not that I don't think they can find a way onto an NFL team. It's just that if their best offensive lineman doesn't get drafted, how are these guys going to? They're going to have to really open eyes this year. They're going to have to really improve.
From there, we go to Ryan Switzer, the next. Julian Edelman, Wes Welker.
Right.
No, I was kidding. I mean, he's going to get those comments, but yeah, I'm just.
Oh, absolutely.
I think he's a nice slot wide receiver.
Well, at the very least, he's an awesome return man because he had 7 punt return touchdowns in his career, and including 2 last year. So, at the very least, this guy is just a electric return man, and he's going to get all this stupid, lunch pail, coach's son, gym rat comments that you can imagine. So, Switzer was. The thing is, he was only a 3-star recruit, but I remember him immediately impacting North Carolina as a freshman. So to me, that says a lot about his work ethic because he goes from 3-star recruit at a major FBS program and becomes a household name really for college football fans right away. That's pretty rare. A lot of 3-star recruits, if a 3-star recruit ends up at certain Big Ten schools like maybe Ohio State or Michigan or Alabama, they probably redshirt. But Ryan Switzer came on the scene and became a household name as a return guy and a slot guy right away.
North Carolina State has a running back, 5'9", 203, Matthew Days, and a fullback, Jalen Samuels. Are either of these guys draftable?
Samuels is really he's only a junior, but I think they list him as a tight end, but he's 5'11", 223, so he's certainly a running back build. But what's crazy about this guy is he had 16 touchdowns last year, lined up out of the backfield, and as a receiver, 65 catches. I think he's like that receiving fullback type, kind of similar in role as Charles Clay, but not that big. So I'm just curious how our NFL team's gonna project him. He's a junior, so I don't expect him to declare, but I wanted to include him here. Matthew Days, I don't know if he's draftable, but he played really well after their starting running back, Shadrach Thornton, was dismissed because of multiple off the field issues. So Matthew Days came in, he picked up and was productive. We know Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback last year, so Days came in and he had some good games. So I think he's a player that will get a look.
Pittsburgh has a couple of intriguing players. You have James Conner, of course.
Yeah.
You feel awful for him because he's going to have a lot of questions to answer, and it's something out of his control. He obviously had Hodgkin's lymphoma last year. Mm-hmm. He's been declared cancer-free. It's still going to be something that he's going to have to overcome, though.
Sure. I mean, you hate to bring this up, but you worry about the recurrence. And cancer, we know what we know about cancer is unfortunately it has a pretty high recurrence rate. So it's something that's going to have to be monitored, and some teams are going to have to really, do their homework on him. But we saw, on a positive note, we saw Sean Coleman, who had a cancer issue when he was in college, and he ends up being a 3rd-round pick by the Browns. So there are, people, these teams work close with the doctors, and they'll determine whether or not there's a risk of recurrence. What's phenomenal about James Conner is he managed to stay in very good shape throughout his treatment. I mean, obviously this guy is a warrior. He's just such a hard worker, and he was recovering from a knee injury too. So, I mean, this guy's recovering from a knee injury and cancer, and he comes back. We know he was ACC Player of the year before. I'm rooting hard for this guy. I don't even want to say anything negative. I just want him to do an amazing job this year and become a high draft pick, because I think it would be a phenomenal story.
From there, we go to
There's really three offensive linemen we could talk about.
I was going to say, and I wanted to hit on Dorian Johnson most of all, because he was a 5-star recruit in 2013. Right. He's a senior this year, and he's kind of bounced around their offensive line. Played mostly at guard, 26 at left, 1 at right guard, played a little bit of left tackle. Is he going to be a guy that gets drafted? Because he hasn't necessarily lived up to the hype.
Yeah, I don't know, because to me he's kind of the third wheel on their offensive line, because people talk about Adam Bisnawadi, who plays left tackle, and he was playing left tackle when TJ Clemmings was there playing right tackle, and then Alex Officer, who's a redshirt junior, who's played center and right guard. And I think at least when I've been watching Pitt, those are the two guys that stand out to me more than Johnson. I was kind of surprised that Johnson was a 5-star recruit. So I don't know. Is he a draftable player? He'll definitely get consideration. But from what I saw, like, he was always – I liked TJ Clemmings fairly well, like as a second-day player. And then these other guys I think are better prospects than Johnson. So it's kind of curious. I mean, at least we know he has versatility. And he was the second team in an all-conference. So
yeah, last year.
Officer to me is a player who he might not declare, but I thought that he's at least a bigger guy playing in that interior, and Johnson is kind of a more leaner guy. I mean, to say that about 315 sounds weird, but
yeah, exactly. Syracuse has one prospect, Marquez Hodge. I don't know if he's going to get drafted because he's 5'11" and 219.
I absolutely do not think he's going to be drafted, but I think he's got potential to make some team as a special teamer.
And we head to Virginia, who's got a couple really intriguing prospects. The first one, Quinn Blanding.
2 5-star recruits.
Yeah, Quinn Blanding. First team All-ACC last year. Another big safety, a little leaner at 205, but 6'2". I could see a team absolutely falling in love with him.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Asking him to put about 10 pounds on, and trying to make him into that Cam Chancellor type mold player, because he can do a lot of different things.
He was a day one starter. They recruited this guy. He's played every game. He started every game. And he was first team all-conference last year, and I actually thought he was a better player the year before. I mean, not a better player, but he had a better season. So I think he's definitely one of these hybrid-type safeties, but he's got the pedigree. He's got the recruiting pedigree, and he's going to continue to play a key role in their defense. I think Virginia's program kind of fell off, but now we're seeing like maybe they're going to be on the upswing here. New coaching staff, and this is a guy I'm really intrigued with, because as a junior 5-star recruit, we always look at these guys as potential early declarations, and especially a player who's been all conference already and who's started every game. These guys are kind of grooming for the NFL.
From there, we go to Quan Mizell, a running back. He's not going to be a guy that's drafted as – I'm trying to think of the word, an every down back, but he is a guy that if you get him in New England, Arizona, one of those teams with creative play callers that can use his ability out of the backfield. He had 721 receiving yards last year as a running back.
Yeah.
He's a guy that, he's not quite Darren Sproles. He is a little bigger, so he can run a little, be a little bit more of a running back, but he has a chance to be one of those guys.
I think Smoke, his nickname's Smoke, and I think he reminds me of a Josh Ferguson type who went to Indianapolis as an undrafted free agent. But I think Smoke Mizell is a better player. I think he's a more dynamic player. 75 catches last year out of the backfield. And he was getting carries out of the backfield too, but in a very similar way, I think, to what to how Illinois used Ferguson, because they didn't have a ton of running room up front. So they found ways to get him the ball out of the backfield in the passing game, and he was very successful. And he scored 8 touchdowns, which for a back that way, that using that style back, that's a good amount of touchdowns, I think. And he does have a little bit of kick return experience. He hasn't really shown there, but I think that he's a player who could find his way into the later rounds. He's not going to live up to that 5-star billing. He's not going to be Reggie Bush or Amir Abdullah, but I think he might get drafted.
From there, we go to Virginia Tech, and we have a couple interesting guys here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to skip a couple, but we'll go with Kent Eckerman. He's an edge player, 6'3", 255, but he had a knee and meniscus in December of 2011, and he's only got 15 sacks in his career.
Yeah, we want to watch out for his knee because the meniscus we know can cause arthritis.
And then another guy that's really interesting is Isaiah Ford. I think he's going to be kind of the big leap this year in terms of wide receivers. 6'2", 190. Mm-hmm. He put up ridiculous numbers last year. 75 catches for over 1,100 yards and 11 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. That in his 2 seasons at Virginia Tech almost has 2,000 yards receiving and 17 receiving touchdowns. So he's been a star since he stepped on the field there. And he averaged, as a senior in high school, 35 points per game in basketball. So, again, talk about a great athlete.
Ridiculous.
And then maybe the most interesting one, Bucky Hodges. I'm not going to try to pronounce his real name. He was a 4-star quarterback recruit in 2013 and then has become a tight end and at tight end. I think he's a guy that could surprise and go in round 2.
Yeah, first of all, I love Isaiah Ford. Seth and I play in a dynasty fantasy league, and we have a developmental draft. And Isaiah Ford was a guy that I told Seth I was definitely targeting, and unfortunately I didn't get him. But I really have high hopes for him. I think he can be a high draft pick, 1st or 2nd round, and I think he's definitely going to declare after this year. To put up over 1,100 yards and over 15 yards per catch as a sophomore in Virginia Tech's offense. I mean, we're not talking – they don't have great quarterbacks there. This is they had – they were on their 2nd quarterback in their first game. So Isaiah Ford, what a player this guy is. I think he has great potential. Bucky Hodges is 6'7", 245. He's a 4th-year junior. And when I was talking about Jordan Leggett earlier, I think Bucky Hodges is a similar type of player except better. So you've got and another guy who averaged 13 yards per catch last year and over 500 yards, again with Virginia Tech's quarterback situation. So I really like those 2 guys out of the passing game, and I think they have potential to be day 1, day 2 picks. I don't think Bucky Hodges is going to go day 1, but day 2 for sure. And Isaiah Ford, I think, has potential to move into that late day 1.
And the final player is Duke Ejiofor from Wake Forest, 6'4", 270. Allegedly ran a 4.53 and had a 39-inch vertical in high school.
I'm guessing he was a lot lighter than 270 when he did that.
But that's only turned into 6.5 career sacks. Again, we talked about it earlier. Athletes at the edge position usually end up getting drafted late day 2, early day 3. Is that the case with Duke?
I put him on here because he was actually spotlighted by PFF as a potential breakout candidate, because Wake Forest, you don't really think of anybody coming out with eligibility remaining out of Wake Forest, but he's going to be a 4th-year junior. 6'4", 270. If he's anywhere close to 4'5" and 39-inch vertical, then we might be talking about a surprise late day 1 pick. So I don't know. This is a guy who's kind of a mystery man to me, but I wanted to put him into this preview because he projects to be a potential top 90 pick. And anybody who can appear in the top 3 rounds when we're doing this in April is a guy I want to keep my eye on. So this is credit to PFF for bringing this guy to my attention because I did not know about him. And then when I looked into him, I'm like, all right, this is a player who had 4.5 sacks last year, even though he missed the first 5 games of the season with a concussion. So now that's another story because how bad is it? Missing 5 games with the concussion is pretty severe too, especially knowing what we know now. So that's something to keep an eye on. But 4.5 sacks in less than 10 games is certainly very good production. And at that size, he's definitely a player we want to know.
And that's it for the ACC. We're going to have some hot takes, but we went a little bit long. So we'll save those keep those in the barrel for next week when we go over the SEC. And but Justin, tell them one more time what they need to do in order to be eligible to get this phenomenal preview that you've created.
What you need to do is find us on iTunes. We're under Draft Breakdown Podcasts. Or you can find us on SoundCloud. Same deal, Draft Breakdown. And all you need to do is take a screenshot after you subscribe or follow us. Subscribe on iTunes, follow on SoundCloud. Take a screenshot, tweet it to me, or email it to me. That's preferable because then I'll have your email address and I won't have to ask you for it. But email it to me, or if you tweet it to me, include your email address, and then I will send you a copy of this document. It is a PDF. It is 127 pages. It's got over 350 players to watch. And as I said at the outset, if you go to the table of contents, you can click on that team. It'll take you right to that page. So what you can do during the season, you're watching Michigan and Ohio State, and you want to see which players that you need to focus on for the upcoming NFL draft. And you just click on those schools. It'll take you right to that page, and you'll have a good list to start from. And maybe we'll add to that list as the season goes on.
That's right. And make sure you do that. Subscribe on iTunes. Check us out on SoundCloud. We'll be back next week to wrap up the Power 5 conferences and talk about the SEC. And then the next week, it's just about that time.
Yeah. We'll have one more week where we talk about the group of 5 and the independents.
The independents and group of 5. But from there, I mean, it's coming up. It's almost here. So It's going to be exciting.
I mean, everyone getting pumped up for Cal and Hawaii, where we might have, as many as maybe 1 or 2 prospects to watch, but it'll be enough because last year we were watching, if I'm recalling correctly, we were watching Carson Wentz and North Dakota State take on Montana. So this is a little bit of a step up from that.
Exactly. Well, that's it from us today. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us. We'll be back next week. Have a good night, everybody.